I had no clue about what I was about to hear. In fact, I wasn't supposed to hear anything at all. It was nothing more than a ridiculous accident, something small, random, yet powerful enough to shatter my world completely, like a window cracking apart and letting in the harsh, bitter truth. That night, Ashley had left in a hurry. She was running late, barely stopping to grab her purse before tossing a quick, absent-minded, "love you," over her shoulder. The door slammed shut before I even had the chance to respond. Nothing about it seemed out of the ordinary. Nothing seemed off. But my phone was still in her car. I didn't notice right away. At the time, I was in the kitchen, reheating some leftovers and pouring myself a drink. It wasn't until my eyes landed on the counter, on the empty space where my phone should have been, that I realized it was missing. My first reaction was mild frustration. I needed it. I had messages to check, news to scroll through, just something to keep me occupied while I ate. Then, my smartwatch vibrated. A notification. Recording saved. I frowned. That didn't make any sense. I hadn't started any recording. I barely even used that feature. But my phone had this habit of activating things on its own when jostled the wrong way. That had to be it. Maybe it had slipped between the seat and the center console, pressing against the buttons just right. The file was still fresh, only a few minutes old. I hesitated, hovering over it for just a second before curiosity got the best of me. I tapped play. At first, there was nothing. Just the soft hum of the car engine. The faint sound of tires rolling against the pavement. Then came the rhythmic clicking of a turn signal, followed by a quiet sigh. Ashley's sigh. I almost dismissed it right then and there. Just background noise. Nothing important. And then, a voice. One I didn't recognize. "You miss me." A man's voice. Deep. Confident. Too comfortable, like he belonged there. My stomach tightened. Ashley laughed. Not the kind of polite chuckle she gave coworkers or strangers. This was soft, warm, light in a way I hadn't heard in months. A laugh meant for someone else. "You know I do." The car made a sharp turn, the tires screeching slightly. She was probably pulling into a parking lot. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out whatever sound came next, muffled rustling, the shift of movement. Then, unmistakably, the sound of lips meeting. A kiss. Slow. Drawn out. My fingers clenched around the edge of the counter so tightly they ached. "Not here," Ashley murmured, her voice softer now, teasing. "Someone might see." The man chuckled. "You love the risk." Then, silence. I stared at my phone, my vision blurring at the edges. My mind refused to process what I had just heard. The room around me felt different now, like I had unknowingly stepped into a warped version of my own life, one where none of this was real, where Ashley wasn't sitting in her car, kissing another man, whispering to him the way she used to whisper to me, back when everything between us still felt electric and new. For a moment, I thought I might be sick. I didn't move for a long time, my breath shallow, my fingers ice-cold against the screen. The audio file remained open, as if waiting for me to make a choice. Play it again. Delete it. Pretend I never heard it. But I had heard it. There was no undoing that. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to focus. Where was she right now? Who was he? How long had this been happening? My mind raced through every possibility, every scenario, and I hated every single one. I had two choices. Sit here and let my imagination tear me apart or do something. I grabbed my keys. The drive was a blur. I barely remembered getting into the car, barely registered pulling out of the driveway. My hands gripped the wheel too tightly, my knuckles stiff, as if my own body wasn't entirely under my control. I knew where Ashley claimed to be. The same upscale bar she always mentioned, the one where she supposedly sipped cocktails and vented about work with her friends. But she wasn't there. I parked across the street, scanning the entrance for any sign of her. People came and went in small groups, laughing, talking, but not Ashley. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. Then, I spotted her car. Not in the bar's parking lot. Not anywhere near where she should have been. It was parked 2 blocks away, tucked into the shadows of a dimly lit side street, right outside a cheap motel. My pulse pounded, deafening. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the wheel, staring at the car as if I could will it to vanish. As if I could pretend this wasn't happening. Maybe there was an explanation. Then, the motel door swung open. Ashley stepped out. And she wasn't alone. The man from the recording followed her, tall, broad-shouldered, his button-down still slightly untucked, like he had gotten dressed in a rush. Ashley tossed her hair over her shoulder, laughing as she touched his arm in a way that made my stomach churn. I barely recognized her. Then, right there, In the open, she kissed him. No hesitation. No guilt. Like she didn't have a husband waiting at home. Like she didn't even care. Something inside me snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, I was already out of my car, crossing the street with steady, deliberate steps. They didn't notice me at first, too caught up in whatever intimate moment they were sharing. But then Ashley turned. The smile on her face faltered, freezing in place as if someone had pressed pause. Her whole body went rigid. "Jason," she said, her voice unnaturally high-pitched, forced, dripping with something that made my blood run hot. I cut her off before she could say another word, my tone sharp as steel. "What do you think you're doing?" The man standing beside her furrowed his brow, glancing between us as if only now piecing together the situation. He didn't seem nervous, just slightly irritated. Ashley took a step toward me, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I instinctively moved back. "Jason, I can explain," she offered quickly. A bitter, humorless chuckle escaped my lips. "Oh yeah? Go ahead. Explain." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Because she knew. She knew there was nothing she could say that would make this right. And I knew there was no coming back from this. For a moment, we all stood frozen. The noise of the city carried on around us, car horns blaring in the distance, muffled conversations from passers-by, the hum of life continuing as if my world wasn't currently collapsing. But this was real. Ashley stood there before me, her lipstick slightly smudged, her blouse wrinkled in a way that told me everything I needed to know. And the man beside her, whoever he was, didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. A dark, unfamiliar emotion stirred inside me, but I forced it down. I wasn't going to lose control, not here, not in front of some cheap roadside motel where my wife had just finished doing who knows what with some stranger. Ashley let out a light laugh, forced and uncomfortable, as if hoping to brush this off as some kind of misunderstanding. "Jason, listen, I was just what?" My voice came out colder than I'd ever heard it. "Just leaving a motel with another man? Just lying straight to my face." Her eyes flicked toward the guy beside her, as if expecting him to step in and shield her from this confrontation. He didn't. Instead, he crossed his arms and observed, mildly entertained by the whole scene. Then, something in her demeanor changed. The guilt that had flickered in her expression disappeared. The artificial sweetness she usually carried vanished. She straightened her posture, lifted her chin, and folded her arms as though I was the one inconveniencing her. "You're overreacting," she said flatly. I actually laughed short, sharp, more a release of pressure than amusement. "Overreacting?" I repeated, shaking my head. "Ashley, I heard you. On my phone. You were kissing him. In the car. I listened to the whole thing. I know. That got to her. I saw it in the way her lips parted slightly, the way her shoulders tensed. For the first time, she looked shaken. How she whispered. "My phone was in your car," I said simply. "It recorded everything." The man beside her let out a low whistle, shaking his head. "Damn. That's rough." For the first time, I turned to him, sizing him up. He was taller than me by a couple of inches, probably in his early 40s, with sharp features and an insufferable smirk that made my skin crawl. "You think this is funny?" My voice was dangerously calm. He shrugged. "I mean, not for you." Ashley grabbed his arm quickly. "Nathan, stop." "Nathan." I clenched my jaw, the pressure in my temples growing unbearable. "How long?" I asked, staring directly at her. She hesitated, just for a second. But that was all it took. I nodded slowly. "That long, huh?" She sighed, rubbing her temple as if she were the one dealing with something exhausting. "Jason, look, this wasn't supposed to happen like this." A dry, bitter chuckle slipped past my lips. "Wasn't supposed to happen like this?" I repeated, incredulous. "Are you serious right now? When was it supposed to happen, Ashley? Were you ever planning to tell me? Or was I just supposed to keep living in blissful ignorance while you—" I cut myself off, disgust churning in my stomach. "I can't even look at you." She scoffed. Actually scoffed. Like I was making a big deal out of nothing. "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said. "It's not like you've been perfect either, Jason. You've been distant. You've been—" "Don't you dare try to turn this on me," I snapped, my voice sharp as a blade. "Don't even try it." Her lips pressed together. "Good." Nathan shifted his weight, clearly losing interest. "Look, man, if you're just gonna stand here arguing, I'm gonna head out. Ashley, I'll see you later." He turned, as if this was just another casual night out. As if he was leaving a bar after a few drinks, not walking away from a man whose marriage he had just torn apart. Something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, directly into his path. You're not going anywhere. He arched an eyebrow. Or what? I didn't know. My mind was racing, my body tensed, every muscle wound so tight I thought I might explode. But before I could do anything, Ashley grabbed my arm. Jason, stop, she hissed. There was no fear in her voice. No regret. No concern. Just irritation. Like I was embarrassing her. I wrenched my arm free, stepping back as I took a good look at her. Really looked at her. She didn't seem remorseful. She didn't appear heartbroken over what she had done. She just looked inconvenienced. Like I had ruined her night. And that was the moment I knew. This marriage was already over. I stood there, staring at Ashley as if she were a complete stranger. Like the past 8 years had been nothing more than some elaborate joke at my expense. There was no trace of regret in her eyes. No sign of remorse. Just a flicker of annoyance, as if I had caught her sneaking a piece of candy instead of betraying our vows in a cheap motel. And Nathan, because, of course, his name had to be Nathan, simply rolled his eyes and turned toward the parking lot, muttering under his breath, I don't have time for this. I should have let him go. Should have turned on my heel and walked away without another word. But something inside me, something wrong, something unwilling to let them dictate how this ended, held me in place. You really think you can just walk away? I asked, stepping forward. Nathan halted, exhaling like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. Dude. She picked me. Get over it. For a split second, I nearly lost control. Every muscle in my body tensed, my breath coming sharp and uneven. Ashley's hand clamped around my arm, tighter this time. Jason. Stop. Just go home, she insisted, her tone dismissive, as if I were some desperate man standing in the rain, begging for another chance. Like I was the one who didn't belong here. Like she could erase me from her life with a single sentence. Something shifted inside me. I inhaled slowly, stepping back. When I finally spoke, my voice was eerily calm, the kind of calm that made her hesitate. You know what, Ashley? You're right. I gestured toward the rundown motel. This is what you've chosen? A cheap room with some smug, self-satisfied guy who can't even pretend to respect you. A humorless chuckle escaped me. You two deserve each other. Nathan smirked, but Ashley's expression darkened. I saw it then, the flicker of panic creeping in. She had expected me to break, to plead, to fight for what was left of us. But she never imagined I would be the one to walk away first. Without another word, I turned and strode toward my car. I was done. Done fighting for someone who had long since stopped fighting for me. Done standing in the middle of a parking lot like a fool while the woman I once trusted turned me into nothing more than a cruel joke. But Ashley wasn't done. Jason, wait, she called, her voice sharper now, laced with something urgent. I didn't stop. She hurried after me, grabbing my wrist and yanking me around to face her. Her expression twisted into something unreadable, frustration, desperation, maybe even fear. You're not even going to try to fix this? She demanded. I actually laughed. Fix this? Ashley, are you out of your mind? I just caught you cheating. I heard it. I saw it. I confronted you, and your response was to tell me to go home. What exactly do you think is left to fix? Her lips parted, but no words came. Then, her features hardened, and she crossed her arms. Oh, don't act so innocent, Jason, she snapped. Like you haven't checked out of this marriage for months. You barely even look at me anymore. What did you think was going to happen? I stared at her, stunned. That was her excuse? That was her justification? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. So instead of talking to me, instead of telling me how you felt, you decided to sneak around behind my back? That was your solution. She hesitated. Just for a moment. But it was enough. Maybe I wouldn't have had to if you had been a better husband, she spat. And there it was. No remorse. No guilt. Just blame. From a few feet away, Nathan stood watching, arms crossed, his amusement clear. I turned to him, my voice devoid of emotion. You can have her. Just remember, one day, it'll be your turn to feel this knife in your back. With that, I got into my car and drove away. Ashley didn't chase me. She didn't scream after me in some grand, dramatic plea for forgiveness. Because she believed I was bluffing. She was convinced I would come back. She had no idea that would be the last time she ever saw me as her husband. The drive home was a blur. One moment, I was pulling out of that miserable motel parking lot, watching Ashley and her so-called choice shrink in my rearview mirror. The next, I was parked in my driveway, staring blankly at the darkened windows of the house I once believed was ours. I should have been furious. And I was. But underneath that anger, buried deep beneath the weight of everything that had just unraveled, was something worse: emptiness. The kind of hollow ache that seeps into your bones when you realize the life you built with someone was never what you thought it was. For a long time, I didn't move. I just sat there, staring, breathing, existing. Eventually, I forced myself to step out of the car. The house was eerily silent when I walked inside, the kind of quiet that felt suffocating. I stood in the entryway, letting the stillness wrap around me. Then, I made a decision. I wasn't spending another night here. Not in this house. Not in the bed we once shared. Not surrounded by framed pictures of a life that had been a lie for who knew how long. The thought of her returning, slipping into bed as if nothing had happened, was enough to turn my stomach. I moved quickly, grabbing a suitcase. Clothes, essentials, just what I needed for a few days. I had options. I could have stayed with a friend, booked a hotel, done anything to avoid being there when she inevitably returned with whatever excuse she had prepared this time. As I packed my things, my phone buzzed, a message from her. "Ashley, Jason, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. And then, without hesitation, I did something I never thought I would. I blocked her number. The act itself shocked me, but what surprised me even more was the feeling of relief that followed. For the first time, I refused to let her control the conversation. Not this time. She had already made her decision, throwing away everything we had built for the fleeting thrill of a cheap motel and a man who didn't even care enough to stick around afterward. Now, she was about to understand what it meant to be left behind. Before walking out, I did one last thing. It was petty, something I hadn't planned. My body just moved on instinct. I reached for the framed wedding photos sitting on the living room shelf, the one she had insisted we display for guests, the one she had looked at for years with a smile that I once believed was real. I didn't smash it. I didn't burn it. I simply turned it face down. Then, without looking back, I walked out the door. That night, I checked into a hotel. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet place a few miles away where I could sit with my thoughts without feeling her presence lingering in every corner. Sleep never came, not that I expected it to. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything over and over like a cruel film I couldn't turn off. The recording, the motel, her laughter. The signs had been there all along, small, almost unnoticeable clues that I had ignored because I trusted her, because I believed in us, because I was a fool. But dwelling on that wouldn't change anything. She had made her choice. Now, I had to make mine. The first thing I did the next morning was call a lawyer. I refused to be the kind of person who wasted months searching for explanations, drowning in heartbreak while she played house with someone else. No, if she wanted to act single, she could be single. I barely finished leaving a message when my phone vibrated. The number wasn't one I recognized. I hesitated before answering. "Hello." A pause. Then her voice, cautious, testing the waters. "Jason." I gripped the phone tighter. "Why do you care?" Silence. I could picture her now, lips pressed together, eyes narrowing, just like she always did when she wasn't getting her way. "I just want to talk," she finally said. "Please." "There's nothing left to say, Ashley." A sharp inhale. Then, indignation. "Oh, so that's it? You're just going to throw everything away?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "I'm throwing everything away? Are you actually serious right now?" "You don't understand," she rushed out, her voice tinged with desperation. "It wasn't supposed to be like this, Jason." "Oh, really? And how exactly was it supposed to be?" My voice was cold now. "A secret you kept behind my back forever? You were never going to tell me, were you?" More silence. And that told me everything I needed to know. I ran a hand down my face, exhaling sharply. "Ashley, listen carefully. We're done. I already called a lawyer. You'll get the paperwork soon." Her breath hitched. "Wait. No. Jason, don't do this." Now she cared. Now that she realized I wasn't just some fool she could string along indefinitely. Now she wanted to talk. I had no interest in hearing her out. "Goodbye, Ashley." And just like that, I hung up. It was my first real step toward leaving her behind. An hour later, the hotel room phone rang. I ignored it at first, assuming it was just the front desk. But the ringing persisted, insistent, aggressive. I knew. It was her. I let it go to voicemail. Then my cell phone lit up with a new email. From Ashley. Subject: "Please talk to me." I hesitated, then opened it. "Jason, please don't do this. I know I hurt you, but we need to talk. You don't understand the full story. It's not what you think. Please answer me. Please." Not what I think. Was she actually serious? I had heard her. I had seen her. What explanation could possibly change what had already been laid out in front of me? That she had tripped and accidentally landed in a motel room with some random man? That she had been engaging in some kind of community service in bed? I clenched my jaw, shoved my phone into my pocket, and left the hotel before I did something reckless, like responding. I needed air. But Ashley wasn't done. By the time I returned with a cup of coffee, there were 2 more emails waiting. One was longer. From Ashley. Subject: please, just listen. Jason. I know you're angry. I don't blame you. But I need a chance to explain. Nathan wasn't supposed to happen. I don't even know why I let it get this far. I've been feeling lost for months, and I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you didn't love me anymore. Please don't call a lawyer yet. Just meet me in person. One last time. I'll tell you everything. I love you. You're my husband. This doesn't have to be the end. Ashley. As I stared at her words, a sharp, relentless pounding echoed in my skull. I love you. This doesn't have to be the end. What a ridiculous notion. Without hesitation, I erased the email, refusing to grant it a response. But Ashley wasn't done. That night, when I returned to my hotel, she was waiting. Standing near her car in the dimly lit parking lot, her arms were folded tightly across her chest, her eyes swollen and red-rimmed. A familiar, unwelcome twist coiled in my stomach, not from guilt, but from sheer, unfiltered rage. The moment she spotted me, she pushed off the car, her voice reaching me before she even took a step forward. Jason. I stopped a few feet away, keeping my distance. How did you find me? She let out a sharp breath, frustration etched into her features. Your credit card, Jason. Did you really think I wouldn't check our statements? A humorless chuckle escaped me. Of course. Even now, she had no hesitation when it came to prying into my personal affairs. She stepped closer, her voice carrying a desperate edge. Please, just talk to me. I remained motionless, my expression unreadable. Talk to you? You had plenty of chances to talk, before you decided to betray me. Her face contorted with emotion. You don't understand. I scoffed, my arms crossing over my chest. Then make me understand, Ashley. Go ahead. Tell me why I should believe anything you have to say. A brief hesitation flickered in her eyes, just for a second. But I caught it. Then she sighed, the glow of the hotel sign reflecting in the wet sheen of her gaze. I made a mistake, she admitted. I tilted my head, studying her. A mistake? Which part, exactly? The months of sneaking around? The secret motel rooms? Or was it just the moment when you got caught? Her eyes flashed with indignation. That's not fair. I laughed coldly, shaking my head. Not fair? Not fair? Are you serious right now? Ashley groaned, dragging a hand through her hair. Jason, you're making this impossible. No, Ashley. You made this impossible the second you chose to cheat. My voice carried a finality that even she couldn't ignore. I don't know why you're here. Her voice softened, trembling with something close to remorse. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. I felt like I was losing you. Like we weren't us anymore. I stared at her, a hollow realization settling over me. She wasn't apologizing. She was justifying it. And at that moment, I saw the truth for what it was. She didn't regret her choices. She only regretted getting caught. My pulse steadied. The storm that had been raging inside me for days finally began to quiet. Ashley. My voice was unnervingly calm. Go home. Her breath hitched. Jason, please. Go. Home. She held my gaze, something unspoken flashing behind her eyes. Desperation. Frustration. Maybe even a trace of fear. But she understood. She had lost. Without another word, she turned, got into her car, and drove away. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt free. I didn't stand there, watching her tail lights disappear. I didn't let my mind wander, wondering if she was sobbing, if she was filled with regret, or if she was already running straight to Nathan's arms as though I had never existed. I simply walked inside. And I slept. For the first time in days, I actually slept. No restless tossing and turning. No endless staring at the ceiling while my mind replayed every painful memory. Just sleep. And when I woke up, I had one purpose. To erase her. Not in some dramatic, anger-fueled purge where I burned her belongings or shattered our wedding photos. That would mean I still cared, still felt something strong enough to be consumed by rage. No, I wanted something quieter, something colder. I wanted her to mean nothing to me. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts. Good. The morning was spent making arrangements. My lawyer responded quickly. We scheduled a meeting. The divorce was happening. But Ashley wasn't going to let go that easily. That afternoon, she showed up at my workplace. I had just returned from lunch, settling in at my desk when I heard the commotion at the front entrance. A voice, loud, insistent, unmistakably familiar. I didn't need to turn around to know. I closed my eyes for a brief second, took a steadying breath, then pushed back my chair. Ashley stood at the receptionist's desk, her arms crossed, frustration tight in her features. The receptionist, a young woman named Megan, looked utterly uncomfortable, like she wanted nothing more than to disappear. Ashley's gaze snapped toward me the second she spotted me. Jason. I met her eyes, my expression unreadable. You're not supposed to be here. Her jaw clenched. You won't answer my calls. I let out a slow, deliberate sigh. I wonder why. She pressed her lips into a thin line, clearly fighting to stay composed. We need to talk. No, Ashley. We don't. Turning on my heel, I started walking back toward my office. But she wasn't done. She followed, her heels clicking against the floor as she marched after me, ignoring the confused stares of my coworkers. Jason. Her voice snapped like a whip. I turned so quickly that she nearly collided with me. What? My voice was sharp, unwavering. What do you want, Ashley? I already told you, this is done. We are done. You need to accept that and move on. Her face twisted with frustration. Move on? Move on. You're my husband, Jason. You can't just throw me away like this. A bitter laugh escaped me, sharp, devoid of humor. Throw you away? Ashley, you threw me away the second you crawled into bed with someone else. Her eyes darted around, as if she had only just realized we had an audience. The whispers, the stares. This wasn't some private moment where she could twist the conversation in her favor. Lowering her voice, she tried again. Jason, please. Can we just go somewhere and talk? I inhaled deeply, then stepped closer, ensuring she caught every word. My voice was calm, unwavering. No, I held her gaze. There is nothing left to say. I am divorcing you. Ashley's eyes burned with defiance as she stood in front of me, nostrils flaring. You need to leave. I told her, my voice even and unwavering. You're making a mistake, she shot back. I let my tone drop, turning it colder, sharper. No, Ashley. The mistake was ever thinking I'd take you back. Her face lost its color. For a brief moment, she stood there motionless, as if the weight of reality had finally sunk in. Then, she did something that almost made me laugh. Tossing her hair over her shoulder, she straightened her posture and rolled her eyes, trying to make it seem like she was the one walking away on her own terms. As if she wasn't losing. As if she wasn't unraveling right in front of me. Fine, she spat out, her voice clipped and forced. If you want to throw everything away, go ahead. But don't come crawling back when you realize what you lost. I didn't hesitate. I simply smiled. Ashley, I said, my voice calm, steady. I didn't lose anything. With that, I turned and walked away. This time, she didn't chase after me. Ashley was gone. Not just from my office, but from my life. Yet, even as I sat back down at my desk, staring at unread emails and upcoming meetings, I knew this wasn't over. Ashley had lost control, and that was the one thing she hated more than anything. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about regret. It was about power. She had been so sure I would break, that I would stand before her, desperate, waiting for whatever excuse she decided to throw my way. Instead, I had walked away. And now? Now she was desperate. That night, she showed up at my hotel. I had just stepped out of the shower when I heard it, the knock. A distinct kind of knock. Loud, urgent, familiar. Running a towel through my damp hair, I exhaled slowly, already knowing who it was before I even looked through the peephole. And there she stood, Ashley, arms crossed, foot tapping impatiently against the floor, as if she had been waiting for hours. I didn't answer. She knocked again, harder this time. Jason, she called, her voice tight with frustration. I know you're in there. I leaned against the bathroom counter, staring at my reflection. I looked different. Not broken. Not wounded. Just done. A third knock. Jason, open the door. I took my time, inhaling deeply before walking over. When I unlocked it, her shoulders eased just slightly, like she had finally won some small victory. Finally, she breathed, as though my presence was inevitable. But I didn't step aside. I didn't invite her in. Instead, I leaned against the doorframe, my expression unreadable. What do you want, Ashley? Her lips parted, hesitation flickering in her eyes as if she hadn't expected me to be so indifferent. I want to talk. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't we already do this? You came to my job, remember? Made a scene? Told me I'd regret this. Her jaw tightened. I didn't make a scene. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Ashley, you followed me through the office like someone completely unhinged. My boss literally asked if I needed security. Her face burned red. Good. She sighed, shifting her weight. Jason, please. Can you just hear me out? Something about her was different this time. She wasn't smug. She wasn't condescending. She looked nervous. I studied her carefully. Why? She hesitated, just for a second, before exhaling sharply, her frustration rising again. Because I don't want you to hate me, okay? I blinked. Of all the things she could have said, that wasn't what I had expected. Hate you. I repeated, the words feeling strange on my tongue. She swallowed. You don't. I shook my head. No. Because that would mean I still care. And that was the moment it hit her. The exact second she realized she had miscalculated everything. She had been counting on me holding on to something, some sliver of emotion, some lingering attachment to the past. She wanted space in my mind, a presence in my thoughts. But now? Now she understood. She was nothing more than a mistake I had already moved past. Her throat bobbed as she struggled to find words. Jason. I pushed off the doorframe, standing tall. Go home, Ashley. Her lashes fluttered rapidly, as if she was trying to fight back whatever false tears she had left. But she knew. This was it. Not anger. Not sadness. Just nothing. And that was what shattered her the most. She didn't move at first, just stood there, her breathing uneven, her gaze searching my face for any sign of weakness, some small crack where she could wedge herself back in. But there was nothing left. She knew it. Her lip trembled briefly, but she bit it back, forcing herself to maintain control. If there was one thing Ashley hated more than losing, it was looking like she had lost. Finally, she swallowed, lifted her chin, and let out a sharp breath. Fine, she said, her voice clipped and detached. If you want to throw everything away, be my guest. Even now, she was trying to rewrite the story, trying to place the blame on me. I tilted my head slightly. Ashley. She blinked, caught off guard by how calm I was. I already threw you away, I said, my voice steady. The moment I saw you outside that motel, you were gone. You just didn't realize it yet. For just a moment, something real flickered across her face. Not anger. Not arrogance. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of being nothing to me. She exhaled sharply through her nose, pressing her lips together. You're such an idiot, Jason. I smiled faintly. Maybe. But at least I'm not a liar. And with that, I shut the door in her face. That moment marked the final time I ever laid eyes on Ashley. The divorce was swift, I ensured it. There were no prolonged disputes, no drawn-out battles. She didn't even try to delay the process. The instant she understood that her usual manipulations had no effect on me, she signed the documents in silence. Even after everything was finalized, she made a few half-hearted attempts to reach out. A text here, an email there, small, almost pitiful reminders that she was still around. But I never responded. To me, she was no longer a part of my world. And you know what? I had never felt so free in my entire life.